Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Any of you are from the brokers or the corporate team? Can you raise your hand, please? Can you show yourself? Who come from startups? Founders, startups team? Okay, we have a lot of stakeholders today. The objective for my presentation today is innovation-driven leadership. So let's crack the code one by one. Let me share with you quickly about my background. My name is Nop or Pongsatorn Dhanabordeephat. Many of you call me Nop or Professor Nop because I used to be a special lecturer at Thammasat. I taught Global Executive MBA course. But part of my job was actually I started the startup when I was 21. I actually did the pitching right here on this stage when I was 21 years old. And I was still in the university and I was in the computer engineering. And my first project was a startup project and it was an insurance project right here in this room. And I received my first seeding fund for $1 million, which that was a lot by the time, it's still quite a lot today. But the keyword was, once I received the first seeding fund, what's next? What's next? I have been trying to grow my business, but it hit the ceiling. It didn't went as expected. And I thought that I could do that, but after a while, it became much more challenging than I thought. And I was a bit curious. Maybe I didn't know enough, so I decided to continue with my education with Harvard Executive Education. And there, I used to be a CEO at DLC, which was part of the TGO. And I came up with a lot of know-how, and then I spin off and I started a new business, and along with another company called Eddu Group International. That was part of my experience. The reason why I share with you my background is that because I have a question at the beginning: why a startup struggle to grow? So when I listen to many of you and talk to many of you, and I saw that many of you are from the corporate team, I would like to add a few more contents because when I started my startup when I was in the United States, one of the startup companies is because I received a scholarship to work in Palo Alto. Palo Alto was around the Silicon Valley or Bay Area. I believe you have heard about Palo Alto. And there were many interesting things there. There was a company called Plug and Play. Have you heard about that? Do you know what Plug and Play company it was? Okay, so Plug and Play or Y Combinator was an intermediary company. They call it the ecosystem player. So let me share with you a quick background before I continue with leadership, because this company was actually begin with one of the garage owner, and many people rent his garage, and one of them were Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They didn't have enough to pay for the rent, so they paid as shared. And actually this guy, he used to work in the corporate. So once he learned the corporate culture, he learned that in the corporate, a company needs innovation. So actually the corporate has a lot of assets and sometimes reputation and customer base. But what's good with startup, they have the fire, they have the energy, but they have no budget, they have no connection. If you compare to this picture on the screen, I got this one from Harvard actually. So this page describes different stages of a company. The first stage was easier to grow, but easier to go away as well, because my sales this year, if we want to double my sales next year, 2 million, no, it's not easy, 1 million more. But if once I hit the corporate level with 2 billion baht or $2 billion, if we want to double my sales, is it easy? People might call me crazy. So who's Plug and Play? Plug and Play mentor Google when they were incubated. He told the Google that you cannot just grow, you need to understand what the corporate need. And then they grew and they became successful and they launched their IPO. And he got all the money from his chat, so he became mentor the next two generation who were Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. And after his mentorship, these two became successful again. So he started to think, okay, maybe I'm a good mentor. So he set up Plug and Play Center. The reason why I tell you this story is to share with you what Plug and Play means. Plug and Play was set up to create corporate innovation. It's just like what OIC is trying to do nowadays. The keyword is, if the corporate or large company want to do some sandbox or trials and errors, let's say they have 20, 30 ideas by themselves, it might be very difficult for them to try them. But if the startups already did some trials and error, it might make things easier. And one more thing on the screen, the most challenging stage is actually the fifth stage, from fifth to sixth, because this is where the company hits its saturation point. So business have life cycles. Sometimes when the business ends at the end of the life cycle, but if they want to strike a next S-curve, the question is they cannot do so with the same models. That's the life cycle of a business. Comparing with Amazon.com. So Jeff Bezos, the richest guy on earth, at that time, he started out with e-commerce, but what made Amazon successful was not e-commerce. Actually, it was their web service or cloud computing. The question is, in a corporation, how can they find or discover this new S-curve or this innovation? Because we don't have a lot of time, so let me share with you some keywords. Disruptive strategy. This is the keyword. I believe that you have heard about disrupt, isn't it? So what disrupt really mean in Thai language? Sometimes we call it revolutionize. Have you ever heard about digital transformation? So do you know what's the background of this word? Actually, the person who coined this word is my professor, Professor Clayton Clinton. Professor Clay say that digital transformation can be categorized into three levels. At the fundamental level, we call it digitization. Digitization is you are turning analog assets into digital assets. In the past, you used to take notes of all the registration in paper. And then you have to turn them into digital. Maybe you scan, maybe you input the data. This is called digitization. The second step, a little more difficult, it's called digitalization. Digitalization is we need to change the data management process. We need to change the thinking paradigm. We forget about the paper filling. We type it in the computer. That's digitalization. Many corporations misunderstood between them. It's not just switching from paper to computer. It's not digital transformation. It's not even close to transformation. Digital transformation is the fact that we change the whole business model by preparing the whole business model or the infrastructure based on the digital era technology. That's the actual keyword. The reason why I share with you this story is I want to explain more about digital transformation. Digital transformation, based on Professor Clayton's definition, contains another keyword, innovator's dilemma. So listen to this carefully, everyone. I have an example for innovator dilemma, and that will help you understand this concept better. When I studied at Harvard, there was a practical joke that we used to say that today TikTok is very popular, isn't it? TikTok makes people have short temper. People cannot concentrate much. People just get the content quickly. They love the summarized content, but you cannot compress 6 years of mathematics class into 2 minutes, isn't it? Have you heard about copy machine like Xerox or Kodak films or Nokia? Have you ever heard about that? Have you heard about that? But don't you believe it? These kind of stories are very cliche that they are still talking about that in TikTok. So what's the fact? If you believe that Nokia cannot survive because they do not transform, let me ask you a question. What Nokia is doing when their sales drop? What did they do? Did they stay still? They're just watching the number gone red and they say that you don't have to do anything. Did they do that as a top executive of a top company? I don't think so, right? We saw Kodak, Mr. Trend. Do you know what they did at that time? Did they do anything? Did they not? Did they just wait and see? I believe that they didn't do so, right? I believe so. So the keyword was the keywords. Because they didn't invest in digital camera or didn't they have the vision? So let's have a look at this word, because disruptive strategy or innovator's dilemma came with a theory which has not been elaborated widely. And that's why I share with you today. And it goes like this. Imagine Kodak produced films and they say that digital camera comes in and Kodak didn't want to invest. Is that top executive good or bad? So let's keep that in the parking lot. I have another follow-up question. Toyota, they produced ICE car, right? Internal combustion. But we are seeing EV in the market. Why don't they do EV? Are they stupid? Are they crazy? Save it in your mind. Let's follow me carefully step by step. Toyota has their own research center. Do they know that clean energy is coming? Imagine, you follow me? I think they know, right? They know. And why don't they produce EV? The reason why, the best way to explain about this is with Professor Clayton's. So listen to me carefully. An industry that I would like to use is the steel. Iron or steel. Like your chairs, all the stage, everything consists of iron and steel. This steel industry started back in 1950s in the United States. And you know what happened there? Steel industry could only be done if you have enough, very deep pocket, because if you want to build a forge, it was what we call the integrated steel mill, which means a very big forge where you have to dig a volcano to forge steel. That was the forge at that time. The investment was billions of US dollars. It could produce only 4 types of steel, and the first type of steel is called reinforcement concrete bar, or the one that you find in the concrete. Have you seen the beams? Yes, those are the bars. That's the easiest to produce. It doesn't have to look good, and it's the cheapest. The margin was the thinnest, which means if I sell it at 100 baht, I only get 7 baht. So that's the first type of steel that they produce. Second steel, a bit more difficult to produce, is called the structure beam, or the beams and the bar. They need to be more rigid. They need to be stronger. So the margin is about 15%, slightly better. The next step, slightly harder, is called the formed steel. All kinds of steel furnitures. And the last part is called the sheet steel. Sheet steel is the very thin sheet metal that you see in the aeroplane or your cars. It has to be as strong as a steel, but it has to be as thin as a paper. So those are 4 types of steels they were producing at that time. And imagine if you were a big corporate. You were the biggest steel producer in the US at that time. Today, let's say, I have an innovation that it has been launched earlier. Let's say some scientists were trying to reverse the heat generated by electricity. So they use the heat from the electricity to forge the steel. You invest $3 billion US dollar, you will get a new type, a smaller forge. And it can only produce the reinforced concrete bar because the heat was too low. It cannot turn metals into shapes, so they can only produce 1 type of rod. And the margin was low, wasn't it? This steel rod steels, should I invest in this technology? So let's follow me. I own billions of business, all kinds of steels. And today there's 1 kind of steel. I have to decide what if I invest $3 billion US dollars to produce just 1 type of steel, which is the lowest in terms of margin. And the answer is no sane CEO will invest in this kind of investment. Why? At that day, when the cost to build was cheaper, there will be new players into the market. And when there's a new market, what they do, new players, they will compete with price. So they will enter price war eventually. So this steel bar margin will drop to 7.543 to 1% margin. And at the moment, you can look at their balance sheet. They only get like 800,000 baht from 2 billion baht. This is what's happening around the world. The margin is very low for all the steel bar players. So back at the same time, did they make a good choice? Maybe it was a good choice not to invest in this business. So I don't have, and moreover, I don't have to compete with this steel bar company. I have enough capacity to produce 10 tons of metals and bars and sheets. Why don't I produce rather than just 2.5 tons, I just focus on the high margin ones like the steels, like the sheet, and I could enjoy more margin. This CEO could invest in something new. They don't even have to invest. They can save 3 billion from investment and avoid the red ocean where nobody wins. And I could enjoy more margin by producing high quality product. That is what we could see. So let's compare Toyota, Nokia, BlackBerry, Kodak. They see the same. This is what they saw. Why Toyota did not invest in EV at that time. So let's say this is the question. I say it's the same. At that time when they did the study, like alternative energy, what were the options? Many options. EV, 5 billion investment, 5 billion US dollars, and research and development. This question might come up in 2005 actually. The question was, why did they not? If they did so, when will they get their profit? So the finance team, they don't even know how to do feasibility because there were no customer, right? So 5 billion for electric vehicle, and there's another alternative, another clean energy, hydrogen. There was also 5 billion. Would you like to invest in 5 billion in hydrogen? And there's another alternative. From ethanol conversion, they could turn it into methanol energy, and it can help reducing the damage. But it was more expensive than ethanol, which was a regular fuel. So shall we invest in methanol? That's another 5 billion. So the same 5 billion, but they don't even know where's the break-even point, and let alone the adoption. So let's see, if I were the Toyota CEO, it was a very tough position. 5 billion, we don't even know when I can get the break-even. This is why we call it innovator's dilemma at Harvard. It is a dilemma. You see that it can be a new innovation. You see that there's a market. You know that the market is changing, but you could not do that. You can't, simply can't. That's the keyword. This is why. It's the same with Kodak. They know that there are many innovations at that time. They knew. Digital camera, yes. Even the new type of film that lasts longer, or video film, or movie film, IMAX high definition film. If you were Kodak, what else you can invest? Can you invest in everything? No, it doesn't make any sense. You get what I mean? I'm running out of time, so this is the dilemma. This is their concern. This is big corporations' innovations concern. This is why the world works like this. We know that innovation might come from a research center within an organization, or maybe it came from startup, because if there are 10 startups, one works with EV, one works with nitrogen, one works with ethanol. If 2 out of 3 of them goes down, and the corporate can work with the rest of them, with the survivor. This is how innovation happens. So my Professor Clayton Christensen, said that innovation could happen only with this theory. There's only one rule. A company or a big corporation, you cannot disrupt yourself. You cannot disrupt yourself. That's the rule. Because it will be like in my example. They don't know what to invest and they can't. So how can they survive? There are 2 ways for them. First, they can set up what we call corporate spin-offs. So you might have your own R&D center or innovation center, but you have to set up a corporate spin-off. So what is a spin-off? Maybe a subsidiary that doesn't really care or share the P&L with the mother company. And I will tell you why. And then the other alternative is investing in the startup that might disrupt themselves. So these are only 2 options for a large corporation. 2 only way to survive for the corporates and startups. So at the beginning of the startup era, they say that the startup might disrupt the corporation. It was quite a mistake, because in the end we learn, right? I have 1 minute to continue with my last example. So what's the reason? Why a big corporation, if you want to set their own R&D center, or if they want to spin off, why they can't just spin off? Because there's another challenge. For example, if they do so, we will cannibalize the mother company, the HQ. So if I am a Kodak, I set up a digital company. If this digital camera company, it will be cannibalized into film camera. Another case study is Xerox. Xerox was one of the biggest tech company in the world. Xerox invent LAN local network. They invent LAN cable. Xerox engineers say that if we could develop this LAN cable, everybody in the office, let's say 100 computers in the same office, they could share documents and sign documents without printing at all. No printing was needed. And the executive might say that, do you understand what Xerox business when they came up with this idea? We produce photocopy machine. We need to print. And that is why the landline team was eliminated at the bitmap. Okay, before we used to have a command line, because we used to use command line system in the markdown. There's no graphic like this. Computer in the past didn't know what graphic is, and how come? Because there are 2,000 lines with 4,000 columns. We call them pixels. Xerox invented that, and they didn't use it. They threw it away. This research came from Xerox. And who found that? Imagine, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs found that, and he said that, hey, this one is useful. Why don't we do it? This is the key. So I'm running out of time now. So most importantly, what I would like to share with you today is that I have an opportunity to work with startups, and I received the seeding fund from both the banks and from the VC from overseas. One thing I could see was that innovation cannot continue. This is my question since the past. Corporate always invest in the startups and you never grow. But once I visited Silicon Valley, I get a new experience. This might be the real answer, how we create innovation from the corporate point of view. I want it to be a mindset for the leader from both corporate and startup team. So this is how we can create innovation together. Thank you very much. Audio Jungle.